This Christmas, I need to say something that might stop you in your tracks. If you feel strangely exhausted, even if your life looks good, even if nothing is technically wrong, even if you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, this episode is for you because the exhaustion you're feeling right now is not because you did too much this year. It's because you've been living inside a version of yourself that no longer fits. And your body is done pretending. Let's pause here. If you've caught yourself thinking, man, why am I so tired? Why can't I just enjoy this? Why does everything feel heavier than it should? I want you to hear this clearly. This isn't burnout. This is misalignment. And Christmas has a way of exposing misalignment because it slows the world down just enough for the body to finally speak. Most of the year, we move fast enough to override ourselves. We stay busy enough to avoid deep questions. We perform well enough to stay accepted. But then a season like this arrives. The pace shifts, the noise drops, even slightly. The expectations soften, even briefly. And suddenly, what you've been holding together starts asking to be felt. If joy feels forced this season, if gratitude feels like something you're trying to perform, if rest feels uncomfortable instead of nourishing, nothing, and I mean this, nothing is wrong with you. Your nervous system is responding honestly to a life that has required too much from you for far too long. And many of us are not exhausted because we're doing too much. We're exhausted because we're still performing versions of ourselves that were built for survival, not for the life we're actually living now. The capable version, the strong version, the agreeable version, the one who keeps it together so no one asks questions. Those versions helped you once, but they are costing you now. And Christmas, whether you love it or struggle through it, has a way of making that cost impossible to ignore. So today, I'm not here to give you a glow-up plan. I'm not here to help you set better goals. I'm not here to motivate you into another version of becoming. I'm here to invite you to stop performing, to stop rushing, to stop pretending your body isn't asking for something different. What I want to offer you today isn't advice. It's a letter. A letter I wish someone had written to me when I was in the messy middle, when I thought the exhaustion meant I was failing. Instead of realizing it meant I was outgrowing a life that no longer matched who I was becoming. If that landed in your body, if something in you tightened or softened or went quiet, stay with me. Welcome to She Rises Through It. Welcome to She Rises Through It, a space for honest becoming, slow growth, and the unfiltered middle of motherhood, healing, business, and building a life that actually feels good. I'm Sydney, and this podcast is where I reclaim my voice in real time. It's not about doing more, it's about doing it differently. If you're craving real conversations, soulful pauses, and a reminder that you're not alone in the messy becoming, you're in the right place. And just a reminder before we begin, I'm not a medical or mental health professional. Everything shared here is based on my lived experience. Please seek qualified care if you're needing support. You deserve it. You're not behind, you're becoming. Hi, loves. Man, Christmas Day holds so much. For some people, it's full of laughter and tradition. For others, it's tender. For some, it carries so much grief. And for others, a sense of relief. And here's the truth we don't say enough. Christmas magnifies whatever is already present. If you've been rushing all year, Christmas makes the exhaustion so much more louder. If you've been holding everything together, Christmas cracks that shell. And if you've been pretending you're fine, Christmas asks you to stop. And that is not failure. That is an invitation. This season doesn't create new feelings. It turns the volume up on the ones you've been managing all year. Across cultures, across the world, this time of year has always marked something similar. A pause, a turning inward, a remembering. In some places, that looks like candles. In others, prayer. And in others, might be music, fasting, storytelling, service, or even silence. Different names, different rituals. However, it is the same nervous system. Because nervous systems don't care what we call it. They respond to rhythm. And this season changes that rhythm. And I want to ground this somewhere very ordinary. A store aisle right before Christmas. My family, we were out shopping as a family. Me, my husband, and our 2 little ones under 3. And yes, you can already guess and already know how this probably goes. Our kids are tired. Someone needs a snack. One kid is crying. The other is just completely over it. And you're standing there wondering why this even felt like a good idea. Why? And then suddenly that magic, that Christmas magic, feels so thin. And that's usually the moment we tell ourselves to snap out of it, to be grateful, to not ruin the moment. But that is also the moment something honest is trying to service. We couldn't find the right gift for our son. We are very meaningful parents. I am a gift giver and I have so much heart when I give gifts. However, nothing felt meaningful enough. Nothing felt exciting enough. And we're not the family that's the next great up and coming thing, like here's technology and all this stuff. We truly try embodying like memories into it and the meaning behind it. And then throughout all of this, my thoughts turn to my husband. What does he want? What would make him feel special? What would matter to him? And after both of us getting frustrated, him continuously telling me like he did not want a gift, we couldn't find anything for our son for his gift, we ended up just calling it a day from shopping. We went home, went about our days, went about the evening. I was so frustrated. I was so mad just because the one day that I finally had time to shop, nothing was found. And in this frustration, it hit me clear as day. Everything my husband kept saying that he doesn't want a gift, it actually meant my husband does not want a gift. He doesn't want something expensive. He does not want something impressive. He doesn't want more stuff. My husband, he is very different. My husband is very humble and he wants peace. He wants love. He wants people he cares about to be surrounded by him. He wants the day to just go smoothly. He is the most humble, steady, grounded man I know. And in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. I was projecting pressure where none existed. And Christmas became so very clear to me. So very clear. And if you've ever seen The Grinch, the phrase, maybe Christmas doesn't come from a store, maybe Christmas means a little bit more, hit me so hard. And what I love about Christmas and have always loved about Christmas isn't the gifts. Christmas for me is a season. It starts the day after Halloween. As much as me and my husband fight about me putting Christmas decorations up, starts the day after Halloween. Christmas is a season. It's this pause, the way the air feels just so different, so magical, the way people soften, The way, even briefly, just briefly, we remember how to be present. At its core, Christmas is about love entering the world quietly, not through performance, not through pressure, but through presence. And yet, we've turned something so magical into something exhausting. Christmas didn't begin with abundance. It began with a baby born quietly. It began with humility, not in comfort, not in power, but in surrender. And what makes Christmas sacred isn't just that Christ was born, is that love entered the world knowing it would cost something. The truth alone dismantles performance. And even Christ had a messy middle. There was time between the promise and the miracle, years where nothing looked remarkable, years where growth happened quietly, years of waiting. Growth has always required waiting, not rushing. And none of it was wasted. So if you're in the in-between today, you are not forgotten and you are not failing. Christmas Day asks something radical in us, right? It asks us to stop performing joy, stop performing gratitude, stop performing strength, because forced joy isn't joy, it's emotional labor, and emotional labor is still labor. Love was never something you were meant to perform your way into. Presence was always the invitation. And this episode is a letter. And instead of buying my husband a Christmas gift this year, I wrote him a letter. A letter about the life we've built, the hard seasons we've survived, and the love that deepened as we became together as husband and wife. And as I was writing it, I realized something, that I want this episode to have a very similar theme and a very similar letter, just a little bit different. And this letter is for you. Dear love, if this year didn't look the way you imagined it would, it does not mean you failed. It means life asked something different of you than you planned for. You thought growth would look like forward motion, clear answers, faster progress, visible proof that you were doing it right. Instead, it asked you to sit in questions longer than you wanted to. It asked you to feel things you had learned how to avoid. It asked you to slow down in a world that does not reward slowing. If you felt lost at times, it wasn't because you didn't know who you were. It was because the version of you that once made sense could no longer carry the weight of who you are becoming. There's a particular kind of disorientation that comes when old identities begin to loosen, when what used to motivate you no longer works. What once felt certain sometimes feels incredibly hollow. When you can't go back, but you don't yet know how you're going to move forward. That space is not failure. It's this beautiful thing called the messy middle. And the messy middle is not where leadership breaks. It does not mean you're a disaster. It does not mean you are chaotic. The messy middle is where self-leadership is born. You were shaped inside a world that moves far too fast for the human nervous system. A world that confuses urgency with importance, that rewards output more than presence, that measures worth by productivity, not by integrity. You learned early, oft you safe, that being useful made you lovable, that keeping up meant you belonged. So you adapted. You became efficient. You became capable. You became strong. You learned how to perform versions of yourself that could survive this pace. And they did survive. They carried through seasons you couldn't have navigated any other way. But survival is not the same as living. And eventually, the body catches up. The body knows the difference. That's when rest starts to feel uncomfortable instead of nourishing. That's when slowing down feels like failure instead of wisdom. That's when joy feels fragile, like something you have to hold together instead of something that just arrives naturally. No wonder you feel tired in a way sleep hasn't fixed. No wonder stillness makes you restless. No wonder rest feels undeserved. You weren't failing. You were waking up to the truth that a life built entirely around urgency cannot sustain a soul that longs for depth. Waking up to the realization that becoming someone new often requires letting something very familiar dissolve. Waking up to the quiet grief that comes with outgrowing who you once needed to be. So let yourself lay it down. Lay down the version of you that survives by pleasing. Just lay it down. Lay down the version that stays agreeable to stay safe. The version that keeps producing so no one questions your value. The version that believes love must be earned through effort, usefulness, or sacrifice. Those versions were never wrong, but they are no longer required. You were not meant to rush through the season just to get back to certainty. You were meant to learn how to stay present inside the unknown, to listen instead of push, to soften instead of force, to trust that becoming does not need to be hurried to be real. There's a different rhythm available to you now. That rhythm, it's one that honors your body, one that makes room for breath, one that allows joy to emerge instead of being manufactured. That moment you stop performing who you've already outgrown, something inside you finally exhales. Not because everything is solved, but because you are finally telling the truth. And that truth is enough to begin again. I want you to notice something before we move on in this episode. Notice what your body is doing right now. Not what you think about what I just said, but what your body did when you heard it. Did your shoulders drop? Did your chest maybe tighten? Did your breath change? This is important because transformation doesn't happen when we understand something. It happens when the body finally feels safe enough to receive it. Most of us have spent our lives overriding our bodies. We've learned to push past exhaustion, to ignore tension, to normalize being on edge. Then we wonder why slowing down feels so unsafe. I absolutely get frustrated slowing down. It is the hardest thing for me. It is the biggest mental mind game ever because sometimes if rest makes you anxious, if that stillness just feels uncomfortable, if silence feels loud, that's not a personal failure. That's your nervous system. And that's a nervous system that learned survival in motion. So if this episode feels emotional, grounding, or even unsettling, that is not something to fix. That's something to stay with, to allow, to be, and not to force anything. I want to talk honestly about the cost of continuing to perform what you've outgrown, because this isn't neutral. When we keep performing old versions of ourselves, our body, yes, our wonderful bodies, our bodies keeps the score. It can show up as chronic fatigue, as resentment you can't explain, as numbness, as you guys have heard in my story. Mine shows up as my face goes numb. Half of my face goes numb and everything spikes. My body alarms me that, nope, no, you're out of alignment, which is completely new. And maybe anxiety doesn't have a clear source. And here's the part most people miss. Performance does not just exhaust you. It slowly disconnects you from your own truth. You stop knowing what you actually want. You stop trusting your internal signals. You start living by expectation instead of intuition. And the longer that goes on, the louder the body has to get through exhaustion, through shutdown, through symptoms that finally force you to stop. And that's not punishment. Our bodies are so miraculous and magical. It is not punishment. It is protection. Our bodies are not betraying us. It's trying to bring you back to yourself. This is why I care so deeply about how we support the body in seasons like this. Because presence is not a mindset. And because this work, it doesn't live only in our thoughts or our beliefs. It lives in our body. It is a physiological state. For me and my family, herbal support has been one way we help our body remember how to regulate, especially through Pioneer Pam. And I want to say this clearly. I don't use herbs to override my body. I don't use them to push through, and I don't use them to fix myself. I use them to listen to it. I use them to partner with my body, especially in seasons like this one, where everything is asking us to slow down, regulate, and rebuild resilience from the inside out. And let's not forget about the hospital visits and stays whenever we're there. It helps me in every aspect of my life. And Mullein, for example, supports the lungs and breath. And breath is not just physical, it's emotional. When life has been tight or overwhelming, breath is the first thing we lose. Mullein supports the body in opening, softening, and exhaling. And guys, elderberry, this is my jam. Elderberry supports our immune resilience, not just during illnesses or sicknesses, but during recovery, after stress. It helps the body remember how to respond instead of staying stuck in defense mode. And lion's mane, it supports cognitive function, nervous system health, clarity in a world that constantly fragments our attention. As a mom who's always going a million miles a minute, trying to keep everything straight, it helps keep everything clear. And these herbs don't force the body into productivity. They help support regulation. They work with the body's natural intelligence, something we have so forgotten how to trust. And across cultures and across history, herbs have always been used this way. Not to rush healing, not to bypass discomfort, but to support the body while it remembers how to come back into balance. And that's exactly what this season and this work is asking of us. And then there's another layer that matters here, and I want to name that because nervous system regulation doesn't stop at herbs. And it doesn't stop at even just our mindset. It goes deeper. It goes cellular. That's where Make Wellness bioactive precision peptides come in for me. Most of us have been taught to think about wellness in terms of motivation and weight loss. But motivation doesn't regulate a nervous system. Safety does. Bioactive precision peptides support the body at the level of cellular communication, helping our systems like sleep, energy, stress response, and recovery work with one another instead of competing for resources. When the body doesn't feel safe, it stays braced. And then when the body stays braced long enough, presence becomes impossible, no matter how much inner work you do. And what I've experienced with bioactive precision peptides is not a spike of energy or a forced sense of calm. It is true capacity. Better sleep that actually restores, more stable energy throughout the day, a nervous system that doesn't overreact to every demand. And that matters because when your system feels supported, you don't have to try to slow down. Slowness becomes accessible, presence becomes possible. You stop white knuckling your way through life and start responding instead of reacting. That is not about optimization. That is about regulation. It's about building a body that can hold the life you're becoming without collapsing under it. Because stopping the performance of who you've outgrown isn't just a mindset shift. It's a biological one. This is what it looks like to support your becoming, not rush it. And before we close this out, I want you to stay with this season just for a moment longer. Not for a plan, not to optimize, just to notice. And I want you to reflect without judgment and gently ask yourself, what moments brought peace to me this year? What did this year ask of me? Where did I feel stretched? And what did that teach me? What versions of myself am I still performing, even though I know I've outgrown? Don't rush these answers. Let them surface in their own time, not with judgment, but with gratitude. Because every hiccup taught you something. Every delay protected you for something. Every ending made space for truth. Because clarity doesn't come from forcing decisions. It comes from honesty, and honesty requires space. And this is where I want to be very clear. If you've outgrown a role, maybe even a relationship, or a version of yourself, you do not owe anyone a performance of who you used to be. I'm going to say that one more time. If you've outgrown a role, if you've outgrown a relationship, or if you've outgrown a version of yourself, remember, yes, you beautiful soul listening to this right now, you do not owe anyone a performance of who you used to be. Release the version of yourself you've already outgrown. Peace doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from being honest. So this Christmas, and anytime you feel yourself rushing, put down the performance. Stop rushing your becoming. Release the version of yourself you've already outgrown. Choose presence. Choose honesty. Choose love. And choose life. Choose the life you are already living in this moment, right here, right now. You, my love, you are not behind. You are becoming, and you do not have to perform your way there. Merry Christmas to you. I hope you have such an amazing day filled and surrounded by all of your loved ones. Merry Christmas, loves. Until next time.